All right, welcome to Alabama Gristmill. It's good to have you back with our dose of a little bit of history of Alabama that may have been lost and you missed in the history classes or even just missed in general. I want to welcome my co-host. I'm Mike Causey. Welcome my co-host, Donna Causey.
Hello. I'm glad to be here and tell another story today.
I got a little too involved in telling about what we're doing before I even introduced you. So that's kind of bad.
That's okay.
But it's good to be back and with this new year going. I got a lot of good feedback and I really appreciate that. We got a great story today about some very famous people in history and how they are connected to the state of Alabama.
There's a lot of famous people connected to Alabama, and you don't realize it. And we like to bring out those stories.
Now, this was about the famous Wright Brothers and flying and how it was involved in very historical moments with the state. So, and located down in Montgomery. But before I get into that, I want to thank all the patrons and supporting us. And if you're not one and want to become one, just go to our webpage and click Become a Patron, and any type of support there helps out. You can also send us, if you just want to do a straight donation and help us, you can hit that on paypal.com. There's a button there as well. You can send us a PayPal donation. That's work out the best for us. It's just a lot easier for us to handle it that way.
Yeah, and a lot more secure for everybody else, too. We
absolutely
like to keep things security and everything like that, but it does help us keep this going.
And while we love it, it's a labor of love. There's a lot of costs involved in getting this podcast out to everybody, getting the site going, things like that. So we really appreciate anything to do that to help us keep those costs down and keep the history going.
Exactly, because it's a lot of things we don't know about Alabama, and it's nice to share it with the world.
And if anybody has any feedback, just you can give us an email, info@alabamapioneers.com, or you can comment on our patron page if you're a patron, or through the Facebook page. So
exactly,
we got a lot of good things coming up this year that you'll like. We got some more videos coming out in addition to stories and these podcasts. So keep an eye out for that. But I'll go ahead and let you get into the story now. And let's jump into a little bit about Wright Brothers and how the pioneers of flight were involved with the state of Alabama.
A special event happened in Alabama with the Wright Brothers, and people probably don't even know anything about it. Very few people do anyway. Montgomery is where it took place, which is a city with a lot of history. We speak about Montgomery all the time with all the historic events that took place there. But one involved the Wright Brothers, like I say. On May 25th, 1910, believe it or not, the first ever nighttime airplane flight was made at Orville Wright's Flying School near Montgomery, Alabama. And I bet people don't even realize that there was a Wright Brothers Flying School in Montgomery. Here's how it came about. 7 years after the Wright Brothers completed their flight at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, which rocked the world, many other inventors followed using flying machines. They all tried to compete with them and do even more. And the Wright brothers wanted to establish a monopoly again, so they started forming a touring company of flying exhibitions all over the place to kind of let people know about flight and how they could become part of it. They wanted to sell more of their machines, our flying machines as they called them. And they realized that they needed to train pilots and potential buyers to fly them because, you can't just sell them and not let them know how to fly. So they began searching for a suitable climate to train their potential pilots. And believe it or not, someone suggested Montgomery, and they decided with the mild climate Montgomery had, and the level ground and the average wind velocity, it was conducive to flight training. So they went to Montgomery. Wilbur came down and arrived on February 15, 1910 at Union Station in Montgomery. And he looked around for a while and finally decided on the 100-acre cotton plantation owned by Frank Cone 3 miles west of town on the Washington Ferry Road. Cone offered him free use of the land for 3 months. And that was a bargain, I guess, for them back then when they thought about that. So that's probably went into it a lot, too. You get free land for a training school. And the Montgomery Commercial Club, with attorney Fred S. Ball, agreed to clear the land, build a hangar, and provide transportation to the field, which is a little bit out of town. So the first biplane arrived by train in Montgomery on March 15, 1910. And Charles Taylor, The Wright's mechanic, as well as his student pilots, Walter Brookins and Spencer Crane and James Davis, followed 4 days later. 2 more pilots who were the instructors were Archibald Hoxsey and Arthur Welch, and more instructors soon followed. When Orville arrived, he added a rear horizontal wing to the plane's rudder system to increase the plane's stability at high altitudes, because they probably needed that with training pilots. They wanted to be sure it was good and stable. And late one evening, on March 26th, Orville made the first engine-powered flight in Montgomery. Well, flight training continued at Montgomery for approximately 10 weeks, despite engine problems and cancellations due to high winds. Because, we have some storms in Alabama, and some of these tornadoes are about to come around, too. So I imagine they had some problems with that, especially in the spring, because they picked the time of year when we have a lot of that going on. On May 5th, Orville received a telegram from his brother requesting him to close the training camp and return to Ohio because they wanted to do some more exhibitions. Probably felt they hadn't trained enough at that time. Orville made sure Brookins soloed, then he left Brookins in charge of the school. And Walter Brookins was the first graduate of the Wright Brothers Montgomery Flight Training School, and 6 more pilots graduated along with him. The school closed in early May 1910 because of the unseasonably high winds and the time it took to get the Wright's workshop in Dayton, Ohio, because they had to get, when it crashed or caused problems or had failures with the plane, they had to go back to Dayton to get all the equipment they needed to repair it. On May 25th, the first flight at night occurred about 10:30 p.m., and several more followed throughout the night. These were the first recorded night flights in history anywhere. So a chain broke the next day and the plane was grounded. I guess they kept it pretty busy that night. Since the school was scheduled to close the next week, the plane wasn't repaired, and they just packed it up and put it on a train and shipped it back to Indianapolis, Indiana for the exhibition flights there. So flight training ended at Montgomery for a while, but then in World War I, the Orville training site was again used for Maxwell Field. Part of it is still there with Maxwell Air Force Base there. And you can find many pictures of this event on the website at alabamapioneers.com, the actual
Yeah, well, that's what I really loved is the pictures that you discovered and found. There's some wonderful shots of the hangar or the place where they worked on the plane with the Wright brothers in front of it and everything. So it's a really historical shots there.
There's a film, too, about the same time. It's got the years put out by the Army Air Corps. It may have some of it may be their training field at Maxwell. We don't know. It didn't identify it that way, but it does show what type planes they were flying at the time and the years and everything. So it's a nice historic vintage film on the site, too. So if you want to look it up on the website, you can see that. Pretty
amazing that, everybody's heard of Kitty Hawk and with the first flight there, but the first night flight was in Montgomery. And it was, how are you talking about a historical moment?
Yeah, it was it was recorded as the first night. I wonder how they did it. I wonder if they had lights on the plane or if they it was lit up around it or what, Yeah,
all I can say, it was very dark. You can imagine that. It was real dark. If you've flown at night and you're in a rural setting, you can realize it's dark.
It's dark out here because you can imagine.
It's hard to fly.
And you realize it's
back then.
Yeah, no city lights, no electricity going on in a lot of these cities around here, too. So he's out 3 miles out.
I hope it was a full moon is all I got to say.
That's probably that is very true.
Maybe that would have helped it out, get a little nature's light on that. I always found that a fascinating story, and definitely go to the site, take a look at the pictures. I've put the pictures in the notes of this podcast as well. So if you've got a podcast player that shows those, you can see the pictures with that in the player. And check that out.
Also on the website, I think the historian at Maxwell Air Force Base has commented some about some more information you might find there, and you can contact him if you want to know more about it, because they do have a historian at Maxwell Air Force Base that can explain things to you. So give you a good name to get in contact with. That's what I love about it. When you put a story up, somebody says, well, I don't think that's quite, because a lot of these stories come from news articles or things like that. And sometimes things get wrong or it's not quite a little comment here or there.
There's human error. I mean, we make them all the time. So, but and we'd like to strive and get, like you said, anybody's got some more information, add to it.
So I always look in the comments to find that, because sometimes people say, oh, that's my grandfather. Here's more information. Oh, that's such and such, and it adds a lot to it. That's what the website's all about, is to, get the real story. Because reporters are not always, you can imagine it was a lot harder to do reports back then, too. So,
as Paul Harvey say, you get the rest of the story.
Get the rest of the story, exactly.
We'll probably go ahead and wrap this one up. We've got some good things going on. We might be doing, even having guests on the podcast as well. I don't see what y'all think about that.
We talked about that.
And seeing if you know somebody that has something they want to talk about with history, please let us know. We might bring them on the podcast here to kind of change things up a little bit, add a little things to it. But
yeah, we've got a lot of ideas. It's just a matter of getting them started and getting them going. Exactly. and getting the funding for a lot of things too, like that. We always depend on that. But
we really appreciate people that are already helping us out, because that helps us keep this going. So really, thank you. And
exactly.
We'll go ahead and wrap this one up. Yeah, I guess we'll let Red Foley play us out with a little Alabama Jubilee. Until next time.
See you
later.
Bye-bye.
On his toes, throws away his crutch and hollers, hey, let her go, oh honey.